Welcome back to the final segment of Cleaning Up the Mess. I want to ask you, Dr. Mohammed, what sort of stuff leaks into the swamp and marine coastal area? I know you talked about some of the chemicals, but what actually leaks in there?
Well, you can look at it at different levels. First of all, you have rainfall in the dump, and we know that it's not covered all the time. So you have materials, actual floatable materials, such as bottles and plastics, styrofoam containers, actually moving out from the area. And they enter the coastal areas, marine system, and then migrate outwards. Anybody who's gone down to Shaka Shikari, for instance, and you walk down anywhere and you're covered with bottles. Nobody lives on Shaka Shikari. How did they all get there? Where did they come from? Right? So it's migration of these solid materials out from areas like that and rivers. And then you have the chemicals. When materials start breaking down, they leach downwards into the soils and then outwards through the hydrological flows. And most of the time, especially in the Caroni system, that hydrological flow leads them out into the sea.
Okay,
We're talking about chemicals such as hydrocarbons, metals, organic pesticides, the dioxins and furans, for instance, PCBs. That study we were talking about in the Sealots Harbor, for instance, we traced the PCB signatures, the profile for the PCBs that we were finding, and it was similar to the PCBs that's used in transformer fluids from our transformers on our posts, electricity posts.
So we actually could have a man-made disaster on our hands in terms of people's health if we don't do something quickly. You know, I want to talk about our drinking water. Does the leachate actually enter our water table? Is our drinking water contaminated?
It's a tricky one in that we suspect in a lot of areas, and this is not only confined to the dump, the Beetham dump, that there is leachate going into our groundwater. It does enter it, and this is of course why our WASA and water resources, where we have water treatment plants before it's actually supplied to our homes. Of course, in certain areas, there are inefficiencies with these treatment plants. Often they're not working or they're sort of overworked in terms of capacity, huge housing estates, so that it doesn't sort of manage the volume, and therefore you will expect that it will get into our drinking water. Okay. So often people have to look to other means of purifying their own water.
Well, you've both painted a rather chilling image, and I want to ask you both, where do we go from here? You know, our food might be contaminated, our produce might be contaminated through the water table. We may be suffering from cancer due to what we're breathing. So where do we go from here? Perhaps you'd like to start, Azad.
First of all, we need to set up proper monitoring programs. There is very little monitoring of groundwater, for instance, or produce in the country. So we have no idea what types of contaminants are getting into these systems. So there must be an effective and comprehensive monitoring program. There were a few monitoring wells in different parts of the country, but that the EMA helped establish, but whether or not they continued doing the tests that's required, we are not certain at this time.
Yes,
I want
Judith?
to take that monitoring a bit further, especially as we're talking about the Beetham dump. We need to monitor what's going into that waste area. I stand corrected, but I don't think that anybody or any agency presently monitors what enters that dump. You do have the trucks going in, people, there's e-waste, there's computer parts, cartridges, there's a multiple number of things, as well as all the other, we know all the nasties that are in there. Proper management should include a proper monitoring strategy. And you must have an agency. While we do have a designated agency, or there must be some sort of integrated approach, because while there are agencies such as the solid waste management, and you have hospital waste systems, and so we need an integrated approach to what's going into the dump, and I think that's where we should start.
And there needs to be a greater effort and thrust towards forcing recycling, for instance. A lot of the materials that get there should be recycled. And should never end up in the dump in the first place.
Okay, very quickly before we go, perhaps you academics can tell us, ordinary people, what can we do to help?
At your homes, for instance, everybody can separate their garbage, start removing the materials that can be recycled, Organic materials, for instance, shouldn't be put in a dump. The trees that you cut at home shouldn't end up in the dump. I know they encourage us to put it outside and the trucks come and take it there, but it can be mulched, turned into fertilizers. That way you can cut down 90% of the methane that's generated from these facilities.
Okay.
And the greenhouse gases that comes out of it. But again, it means that there must be proper legislations in place and a proper method for collection of the recycled materials.
Judith, what's your message?
I think, as I started first saying, you know, it was very positive, and in some communities, for example, in Blue Ridge community, we have we've got proper recycling bins, a plastic heap. We've got a plastic heap container.
Good
where
on
we
you.
all put our plastic bottles in. But I think what we need to be told, and what needs to be, that message that needs to be gotten out to the public, is what happens state when it goes from there. I hope sincerely that it's being recycled so that we could continue this program where we could have separation of waste material starting at our own homes. And I think we can all make a tremendous effort to do that, which will be positive for Trinidad and Tobago in the end.
Thank you so much for taking some of your very valuable time and coming here. I hope your students haven't suffered and you haven't had to give up any lectures. But that's where we wrap up. I want to thank UB lecturers Dr. Azad Mohammed, ecotoxologist, and Dr. Judith Gobin, marine biologist, for coming on today. Well, you heard it from the scientists. The dumps pose a real hazard to us. Plastics and styrofoam can be incredibly toxic, some of the most deadly toxins ever studied. Perhaps studies will prove definitively just how much damage the toxins are doing to us. Thanks to you, all our Facebook page people, we have almost 1,000 fans. Our letter of the week comes from Mr. John Lindsay, who writes, I note among your references to the potential for poisonous runoff leachate into the water table, you do not mention the 10 years of processed poisons from a local beverage and alcohol company which has leaked through a defunct settlement pond arrangement and right into the same water table and into the Caroni swamp. To your list of waste that you saw in the dump, such as plastics, electronics, paper and glass, I would like to add specifically dead animals, spoiled food, agribusiness and food process residues, and airline and cruise ship garbage. Individual household source separation is light years away from us in Trinidad. Our people toss garbage indiscriminately. Just how many are going to make the effort and take the time to sort their garbage? You know the answer. And just who is going to effectively enforce any such legislation, even when it exists? Well, when we began this series, I shared John's despair. Does anyone care? Do we want to change as a people? But your overwhelming response, there are now close to 1,000 fans on our Facebook page. The finest and most qualified environmentalists and scientists in this country, as you saw today, and visiting scientists have joined hands with us. TNT, you do care. Another letter, this time from one of our most devoted fans, Frauke Luning, who has been on this show. Frauke writes us from Europe, there should be a plan to incinerate garbage under strictly controlled conditions. TNT should ban the use of one-way plastic bottles and styrofoam for takeaway food. These styrofoam plates and cups form about 50% of the litter on beaches and around TNT. It's disgusting, she says. 10 years ago, takeaway food in TNT was sold in cardboard boxes, which is biodegradable and burns without hazard. We agree. Thanks for that, Frauke. There has been a draft of a bill that deals with the recycling of beverage containers since 2000. It has been gathering dust. The government of Trinidad and Tobago over the past 10 years has failed to enact any legislation that deals with recycling from manufacture to purchase to disposal. Citizens must know where to dispose and how. The people of TNT eagerly look forward to government's waste management legislation, enforcement, and a proper waste separation plan. Please continue to care. Send in your comments, suggestions, and photos on our environment to cleaning up the mess at guardian.co.tt. Join our Facebook page. A reminder to you that Carib Glass wants your bottles for cash. Call them on 662-223-127, extension 286 and 327. In the meantime, I urge you not to litter, to recycle your glass, paper and plastics as much as you can and work towards creating a cleaner, greener and more beautiful Trinidad and Tobago. This is CNC3. I'm Ira Mathur. Have a great Sunday.